What up, Arizona? It's Robert Picard here with Wrong to Strong. I'm about to speak on the topic of vulnerability, something I learned in the last 15 years of my life. The journey of learning this tool to become probably one of my biggest assets to my everyday life and recovery today. I remember at a young age, at 21 years old, when I first went in through the matrix and I started catching cases, or the career that so many people called it. I remember being taught that vulnerabilities was a weakness. I remember being taught that we were told to hide it because it's a sink or swim environment. So from that point, when that started in my life, I was young, right? 21 years old, still wet behind the ears, coming off the streets from addiction of using opiates. At that time of my life, it was up to 4 grams a day, a needle in my arm, and that's what fueled my negative drive of life. That's what, took me down such a long road of being impacted by this justice system in Arizona, going into county jail and having to act a certain way, having to move a certain way, and not being able to show true emotions and being taught incorrectly, through county jail, and then getting into the yard. I think the first yard, not I think, but the first yard I went to was Whetstone. Like 1,200 guys. I just got there. I'm coming through the Sally Port. I'm building 4 Charlie Pod. It was a 4C10 upper. I was on the top bunk, and I just remember, the culture shock of coming from the city, or coming from life outside of a fence, into having to shift my whole mindset and my whole way of thinking into being able to live alone and being able to move correctly, and not showing certain emotions that others could pry on. Others could, take advantage of you if you showed these type of emotions. So throughout the years, learning that aspect and to be closed off to it, it developed strongly. I mean, I still felt emotions, deeply. I'm very well connected to that in my life and my spiritual journey. Now, I should say, my spiritual journey back then wasn't too strong. Yeah, I went to church when I was younger, did the youth groups, and I never understood what the individuals had when I went, right? And I never understood how they got it or where they got to, going through court ordered AA meetings, NA meetings. I was the guy that got high before I came in. I was the guy that went in high. I was the guy that didn't understand what was going on in that room in that moment. That was the part of me of the vulnerability being shut off. I I didn't get it. I didn't understand what other people had that I didn't have, that I wanted, but I didn't understand how to grasp the concept to accept that type of life for myself. So going through prison, it was even more difficult. I have a time where my grandmother passed, and I just felt so low and so out of tune with life that I didn't know how to navigate that feeling. So for me, it was, I didn't deal well with loss. I went right back. Oh well, let's get high. That's what I did. And I went to prison with a heroin addiction, and I left heroin and became a meth addict when I was in prison. That's where it started. And I was in there for the first 2.5 years, came home for 6 months, and it didn't take long. I was out, and I was getting high quickly, and I was back in within 6 months. And that's went right back to the same yard, and from there On that time, I ended up going up to Maury, and I have memories of feeling so broken down, so lost, just so disconnected. That was some of the darkest times of my life, of hardly even speaking to my family unless it was for money, unless it was for something for me to come up, for me to get my next fix, whatever it was, like. And I look back on it now, and just the pain and the suffering that I put my own family through in those moments. I didn't care back then, honestly, and I don't say that to hurt anybody's feelings, but that's just the honest truth. I was so lost. I went back that time. I was in a good relationship that I took for granted. I overlooked all the things that people were trying to do for me, people were trying to help me out with, but I thought I had it under control. I thought I had it under control because that was who I was at the time. That was my idea of life and how life should look, right? So that was me staying high, suppressing emotions, not allowing myself to be vulnerable to other people because I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. I didn't feel like I was worthy of what was being given to me. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. So I was full blown addiction, and I was stuck in it. And it was just a revolving door. And for that relationship I was in, and it really ate me up because it was a good relationship, but that was the first time I ever had to learn how to cut ties. And not really me in a sense cut ties, but like understanding on how to let go of a relationship. I think that's when I first learned and realized, well, I'm in prison. They're out there. I have no other choice. There's no option. I'm not in control of this, right? I made the decision, that what's that saying? You made your bed, lay in it. So that's where I was. So I was in active addiction, and I was by myself. I remember a time with my cellie, and it was a very difficult time because I owed some money. I had to pay some bills, and I was taking care of it, but it just got stressful to the point where, like, I broke down one day. My cellie grabbed a towel, hung it over the door, and he goes, "Hey, no, you can't do that." And I had to suck it up and stand up. And that's, that was not easy, and that's where potentially a part of me started to callous over in this walk that I was, and started to become something that I truly wasn't, right? Something that the culture within had shifted my mindset to be a part of something that was only temporary, but we were there, and that's what it was. And the biggest thing I think about in that moment is my mother was always there. And the one thing my mother used to always tell me when I was going through this addiction and when I was going through these prison sentences was, don't let it harden you. Don't let it harden you. And I never understood what she said all the way up until yesterday. That's the crazy thing, just reflecting back. But she used to always say that to me, and I would always hear her say it, but I never understood it. So as I moved forward in my prison sentence, I got out again. I was out for a year, and I went right back. I mentioned before, I had revoked my own probation, knowing I was facing a 15-year case. I revoked it on the 6th time of reinstatement for IPS. And I went back into county for about 2 weeks, hit the yard. I was there about a year, grand jury indicted, 4 counts, aggravated DUI, and a plea of 15 years is on the table, right? And that's where my journey started with the way I live today, and how I was able to incorporate vulnerability into my life, and for it to become my biggest asset in my toolbox alone, what works for me, right? And I never saw it at a young age, my capabilities of being able to speak or being able to be open, or just who I am as a person. I didn't hone in on that because I didn't pay attention to the purpose of why I can do that, right? So I ended up sitting in county for 7 months, was finally able to come to terms with that I was powerless to what I was dealing with, leaned over to my lawyer and was like, I'll sign 6 to 10, no probation till me, the lawyer, my lawyer, the prosecuting attorney, the judge in his chambers. Judge lets me lay it out, and he, I was like, no probation. I'll sign 6 to 10 right now, and we'll get going. Gave me 7 years. I did 6 years in a month, and this was the last time I was in. I've been out about 1.5 years, and those 6 years are crucial to who I am today, because in those 6 years I stayed out of the way. In those 6 years I was ticket free. I didn't get any infractions. I stayed out of the way. I learned what my short-term, midterm, long goals would be. I wanted a good job, even though I had 67% of my check being taken and then a gate fee of 25%, and with the highest paying job, I'm only getting $1.80 every 2 weeks. I still went and found a job, and I started as a line server in the kitchen. I went from that to a kitchen cook, morning cook, and then I got my opportunity of breaking the stigma of staff and inmate. I became a CO3 clerk over at Reining Unit. I became a CO3 clerk. I got to get to know another human being outside of a uniform. I got to know the CO3s on a whole nother level, and I got to experience things inside the fence that affect my life today, right? And I took the time to learn office skills. That short-term goal was start where you can. Show them your work ethic. Show them that you're ready to go. Show them that you want this. So that's how I moved to the kitchen cook, a little bit higher paying job. I did that a couple months, and then we shifted in. I got the opportunity. My buddy Cruz was a CO3 clerk at the time. He was going home soon, and he comes to me and he's like, hey, I need to pick somebody. You would be perfect. Your opportunity, is going to come. Just stick with what you're doing and let's see what happens. So I got the opportunity. I became a CO3 clerk, and that was a short-term goal. That was like the midterm goal. The short term was get the job, then get the CO3 job, and then now I'm in the long-term goal as we're speaking, as I'm creating other short-term goals, right? So I got to be the CO3 clerk, and I did it on purpose so I can learn office skills, because I wanted to be a part of something bigger, because I just knew that's what I wanted to do. So while working this job is where I started to learn to open up and be more human, in a sense, a citizen in real life, because I got treated like a human from these individuals. Miss Diaz, Miss Pahey, Thayer, Condry. These were the CO3s that I got to work around and that treated me like human. And we had conversations that weren't even about prison. Like, we just had normal conversations. They genuinely wanted to see me succeed. And that was an amazing experience at the time. And it affected my life deeply to be around these individuals, right? But I remember a time, this is right when DOC was bringing in programs to the yard, and it was Thinking for a Change. Mr. Thayer was teaching it, CO3 Thayer. He was teaching it, and I took his class, and he's a no-nonsense guy. You're not moving store around when he's pulling you out of your pod. You're not pod hopping. You're not going to do no nonsense. You're getting pulled out. You're going to class. You're going back, right? And I try to do my thing one time and he caught me. So, you know, I had to own up to that, right? I had to be vulnerable. I had to hold myself accountable and be like, look, man, my bad. That's on me. So we went and we did this class, Thinking for the Change, first program I ever took in DOC while I was incarcerated. And it was really a great experience to be able to open up and talk and see what was being brought to the table to help change individuals' mindsets and the way they thought and the way they moved. And so going through that class and graduating, Mr. Thayer had asked me one day, I was helping him do some rec activities, I think. And he's like, hey, would you like to come speak in my class? Would you like to help me? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know these dudes. Absolutely not. Like, I'm not speaking. I'm not telling anybody about myself. It's not going to happen. Like, it's shark or minnow, sink or swim. Like, I'm not doing it. So I think that's where the seed was planted. That's where the seed was planted for sure in my journey. If we go a little bit forward, I got reclassed. I got moved over to the next yard. I had a friend, Peter Masinga. Shout out Peter Masinga. Hashtag free Peter. My guy. It's my brother. Got to meet him. We were neighbors for, I think, 3 years. We were neighbors, and we just, man, the talks, the conversations, you know, we were there. He took my conversation, our conversations to a whole nother level, said things like you wouldn't even believe that just stuck with me to this day. And I was working in mail and property, and it was probably the best job on the yard, you know, the perks, you know what it is. But one day he's like, hey, they're gonna do a mentorship program. I think you should get involved. I'm like, all right. So that's where it all started. Off of him coming to me and being like, hey, you should be a part of this. You'd be perfect. So I go through the probation period. I think it was a 90-day period, 30-day period, something like that, of, you know, clean UAs, staying out of trouble, staying out of the way. And then I got accepted in to be in the peer mentor is what they were calling it. And we were creating a program for the yard to provide resources for individuals going home, to help facilitate classes, being a peer facilitator. And we were doing this on our own time because at the time, that's when the RSS, the Recovery Sports Specialist, and the Men in Recovery programs were coming out. But none of those would come to where we were because the yard was closing. So we were doing this just, you know, a group of guys that got involved, that got selected. And this is how we got started in doing it. And we did this for quite some time. And I didn't know what it was at the time. I just liked doing it. I was involved heavily in it. Pamphlets that we created and the packet that we were writing to do this program, and just to be around a group of guys that wanted better for themselves, I'll never forget, because that was life-changing in itself. Going through that, I started to learn more of who I was as an individual. I started to be able to open up a little bit and see the difference. But I'd be completely lying if I said I didn't slip back into my old ways, because I was still in prison, and, you know, the yard was closing. So that program was taken away and it was just gone. So I went back to like a floor crew position. In that time, this was 3 years ago this month. Wow. 3 years ago this month, right? I was on the floor crew. That's when I got the message to call my aunt. And that's when I had to have the visit with my family that my mom passed away. That was very difficult. At first, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use this as a positive. I'm going to stay strong. I'm going to get through it. And I just remember going to the visit and my sister popping up at my mom's and being told the news. And I didn't even talk. I just said, hey, I got to go. laid the tablet on his face, and took off walking on the yard. Took a long lap, right? And it brought me to my buddy King. We had a conversation, and it was very helpful to me. That conversation was very deep, well connected, well spoken. King is a great friend of mine. He always had some good insight in to give me, whatever it was, but I just felt comfortable speaking to him in that moment. And from that moment forward, I kept pushing, because then I got rolled up, bus of the first 60 over to La Palma, and that's where my 4-month relapse began. I went through a relapse for 4 months. We went from an open yard, softball on the weekends, sometimes during the week, basketball tournaments, just day camp, right back to the penitentiary, in a cell, locked down, boom. We're there for a week, 2 weeks, and boom, it was in my hand. I was on and cracking again. That 4-month relapse. And that's where, I know that I was using to suppress emotions of loss again, because I have trouble with it. I was suppressing these vulnerabilities that I'm not allowed to show. So what other thing to do than get high and suppress it and occupy your mind elsewhere, and but I'm not saying that in a good way. I'm not saying that that's a better way to do it, because obviously it's not, like, full-heartedly it's not, so please don't do that. But like, that's what I did to suppress these feelings and these emotions that I was going through. And 1 day turned into 2 days, 2 days to 3, 3 days to 4, 4 days to every single day. It was easy. It was just put in my hand. It was free. It was cheap. It was just because of the guys I knew and who I was. It didn't matter. So that lasted all the way up until the point, like, I had ended up in the hospital. I had, like, swelling of the brain, my blood pressure high, a mini stroke, feeling phantom touches. I remember going to work and coming back. My arm, my left hand was turning purple, and I was stacking pancakes at work, and, like, it just felt like the biggest rubber band snapped me in the arm. It spun me around, sat me down in tears. Like, that was the worst feeling I ever felt in my life, right? They took me back. I approached the security guard at the time over at La Palma, and I was like, "Here's my ID. This is what's going on. I'm gonna take a shower, try to chill out, because I was feeling a bit better." Ironically, I go to my cell. That's the day I received my certificate for completing the mentorship for New Freedom. Tell my cellie what's going on. I go take a shower. As I'm in the shower, my arm is still like a tint of purple. I get out of the shower, I get dressed. I remember sitting at the table. My buddy Tim was at the top of the tier looking down at me. I just remember, "B, you good? Hey, B, you good?" And I woke up on a gurney, like a stretcher, in the back of medical in the hallway. We sat in there for 45 minutes before they decided what they were going to do with me. And it was difficult. I was really going through it. I didn't know what was going on. I just remember one of the officers saying, "It's gonna be okay, big dog. It's gonna be okay." And they take me to the front. Helicopter was there. They couldn't take me on the helicopter because it wouldn't the weight too much with me and the whoever was in the helicopter, right, and the ambulance, the firefighters. So they put me in the ambulance. I remember in the ambulance, they get me stable, and I'm having a conversation with a gentleman on the way to the hospital. I'm in the hospital overnight, and I remember the hospital telling me, like, "You need a neurologist. You need to get this, this, and this." And I go back to the yard, and that's when I stayed sober for like 10 days. I got in an argument with medical. Like, it was a whole thing. But I finally caught a reclass, override to a minimum. And this is where my journey of vulnerability really kicks in. My life is this last year of prison. August 15th, right past my mom's birthday, I relapsed. I got told on. I got involved with the program, and I just added to my list of programs, and I stayed focused. I stayed in there to get it done. You know, I was a year away, not perfect by any means, but you know, I made it to become a peer facilitator. Being a peer facilitator really changed my outlook and my view to be able to sit with other individuals potentially having the same feelings and being able to relate. We got to sit and facilitate a class once a week, 6-week class, lifestyle renovations. Me and my buddy, we got to do that, and it was a very humbling experience. I didn't realize it until now how much I needed that, as much as the guys needed it while we were going through that. And it was a great experience, and it brought me into my strength of vulnerability, of being able to speak up, being able to do what I'm doing right now, being able to open up about who I am and what my story is without caring what anybody else thinks about me or feels about me, because it's my life, it's my story. My sister Tony once told me, she's like, "You're the author of your story. Don't stop writing it." And that really hit home for me, and it stuck with me. You know, I got to experience other individuals overcome. One of my buddy Nate Shepard, he's out here. Shout out to him. I got to meet him in prison on the yard for a short time, see him come home, do good, and to know that me and him got to interact in those moments, and to see where he's at now is an amazing feeling, to see him shining and doing good. And it was all because of being vulnerable and opening up. So I got to come home, and now I'm home. BHT, peer support, case manager for the homeless population. It's such an amazing journey, because I'm in a position to be able to tell my story, to be vulnerable to the public eye or whoever's watching. It doesn't matter who it is, but as I'm able to be authentic, I'm able to be my true self, and I'm able to shine a light on something that's so powerful, and just walk in God's path that was set before me before I was ever born. I'm able to walk in a path that was always there, that I never recognized when I was younger going through the system. And now I'm at a point where I look back and I reflect on these moments of these things, and it's like, wow, that was it all along. I've been able to shift gears, fully understand what trusting the process is in my life, and leaning on God full-heartedly, whether it's my personal life, relationships, with a partner, with a family member, with a friend, with whoever it is, or a new individual you meet on a day-to-day basis. I've been able to stay focused and stay dedicated to a better way of life, a commitment I made to myself a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And I just been able to continue to watch God actively work in my life and open doors that I never thought were possible. All from being vulnerable, all from being honest, all from having morals, all from staying true to my values. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means, right? I'm still learning, I'm still growing. But I'm open-minded. I'm always willing to learn. You know, they say sometimes a teacher, always a student. And that right there is the most powerful thing I've ever heard. Because I'm always, my addiction is learning. Like, I love taking the time to learn something and get to it. And 9 times out of 10, if I just focus and stay dedicated to learn something new, I figure it out. I'm able to do that with the clarity of a sober mind. It was 30 months straight yesterday sober, and I am so spiritually connected today that it's a feeling I've never felt before in my life, and I'm so thankful for that. I feel a level of gratitude you can't explain. Um, I'm just going to continue to keep my head down, let my work show for itself. I'm going to continue to be vulnerable. I'm going to continue to show up for others when they reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. We can have a conversation, meet up, have coffee, whatever it is. And I'm just going to continue to stay humble and know that God's actively working through me to be able to shine a light and to show that recovery is possible. I'm going to leave you at this. The Rise Again podcast is coming soon. For now, let's subscribe, leave a comment, stay focused, stay dedicated, and it's no days off. Let's get it.